Uh,
Hello, we are now live streaming and Ian is back.
I'm back. Sorry, I'm more than a little sick. I should take some drugs. I might actually perform a little bit better, but maybe when we're done here tonight.
Possibly, but that's okay. We'll cope with half an hour. We're not always going to be 100% all of the time.
No, I'm usually pretty good most of the time. Julie actually commented the other day. She's like, "You're not sick very often." And I don't like it. So yeah, um,
Yeah. So
and
on
maybe
to the
this is
topic at hand.
well,
Yes.
maybe this is what led me here, anyways. So, um, I've like I just mentioned to you, I've been kind of burning the candle at both ends. So I've been running myself a little bit ragged between work and different work, and then doing some CrossFit stuff and whatever. Anyways, so that's all ended all at the same time, more or less, the last week or so. And this past weekend, I was like trying to unwind, and I ended up staying up really late on Sunday night, and I watched the live roast of Tom Brady. He's a famous football player in the States
Yep.
on Netflix, and I don't know why I was watching it, but I kept watching it, and I was like, it's okay, but I was like, I was already invested. So I stayed up until the end. And I started an hour late. So I ended up going to bed around midnight, which is not me. I go to bed at like 9. Like that's like my wheelhouse time to go to sleep. And I got up, I was super tired. And all I could think about was, what am I going to say to people when they say what's wrong with you? You look tired. Like, and I'm going to say, and I was running through my head what I would say. And the only thing that kept coming up is, I'm an idiot. I stayed up so late. I'm so stupid. I shouldn't have done that. Like it wasn't good. I sort of kind of enjoyed it, but didn't. Like it wasn't worth my time and energy to stay up, but I stayed up anyways. So of course you have to text me like the night after whatever it is that I'm thinking about. And that's what came to mind was the self-talk, like that habitual kind of initial. And actually what I first was thinking of saying was like beating yourself up, because it was like, why do I need to be mean to myself for making a decision, for choosing to stay up and watch something, and there's a consequence the next day. I understand that, but why do I have to beat myself up for it? Why do I have to go to the negative place of, you're an idiot, you're stupid, you're dumb, like it was a bad idea, bad decision, whatever.
And the risk there is that when we do the beat up on a decision we've made, regardless of whether we go back and go, maybe I wouldn't make that decision the next time. If we do the beat up, then any decision that we then make moving forward, that beat up is part of that decision making. Because, like, oh, last time I made a decision, oh, that wasn't a very good decision. And so we can compound that self talk moving forward as well, which is really dangerous.
I'm not even sure what to add to it, to be honest, because it was just, I think we're all guilty of this to some degree, and I just, I know where it comes from. I know it comes from like habitual stuff from the past, and what you've learned from other people, and whatever. But why does it always have to be like a negative beat up? Why does it have to be? Why can't it just be a
Yeah,
decision that you made?
where's the self-talk that says how wonderful that choice was? Where was that self-talk?
I'm not sure that those words have ever been uttered by anyone. That was such a good decision. I want to pat myself on the back for that.
This is the thing, isn't it? We so easily default to the negative. So when you suggested self-talk, I was like, oh yeah, this old chestnut, constantly, constantly dealing with self-talk. So what it highlighted for me and reminded me that just a few days before, I'd been sitting in a workshop room. It was a 7 hour workshop, so there was going to be a little bit of button pushing going on because it was new and those sorts of things. And I was being the learner, and I haven't sat in a room to learn like that for a number of years. So there was a few buttons being pushed. And we were sitting there, and I could hear myself when there was this next section presented, and I went, oh no, I couldn't do that. If I did that, then that would take more time than I have in the morning. I know, you're telling me I'm supposed to do this every day. I don't have an extra half an hour to do that. And then when am I going to fit in this? What, am I supposed to do that in the morning, or do I do that in the that's just not a thing. That all happened in about 1 second of the suggestion, you could do this daily. And I had this whole rhetoric that went on around justifying why there was no way I could do that. And it was like, wow. I mean, I was hearing myself do it in the moment, and I was like, well, that's an interesting reaction, isn't it? And then it was like, well, when else am I doing that without even realizing that I'm doing that?
Right.
Like in that environment, sure, I noticed it. But we were driving our new car. We did a 9 hour, well, it was kind of like a 10.5 hour drive road trip, which was fantastic. Renz and I do really well on road trips. However, it was the new car, and I've already put a scratch on it.
Oh,
I know. It was the beat up happened for that, I can tell you. And it was because I was reversing into a space to charge the car at a new spot that I'd never been to before, and there was a small little concrete island, and I was reversing the car and I misjudged it,
mm-hmm.
and I scraped the rim on the front of the car, just on the front wheel rim on the passenger side. Okay, great. Renz wasn't upset about it at all. Like, he didn't have any reaction. Now, that was on the way down to where we were going. Any other time that I was driving the car and we had to pull into a charging station, we had to reverse the car in, my self-talk went off and went, I'm not going to be able to do that. I'll put more scratches on the rim. I'm just going to get out of the car and you can reverse it, Renz. That's fine. I don't want to do that.
Was that in your head or was that out loud?
Both. So what happened out loud was, I don't feel like reversing the car. You can do it.
So not word for word that was going on in your head, but
And it's like, okay, I really have to stop that, because I can reverse that car quite fine. Like, I don't need that to chip away at my confidence of driving this car. Like, that's not helpful for anyone. And certainly not helpful for me. But because the incident had happened and I'd made it more, oh, this is bad English.
say it.
I had created it worse than it needed to be in my head, then I basically then decided that from then on, I'm not reversing into a charging station. And so there's no, like, that's just so black and white and not helpful at all. And again, we do this all the time. We restrict ourselves by going, well, now this is the truth. This happened once, so now it's the truth. It's not the truth. I reversed that car like bucket loads of times. I've had the car since March or something. I can reverse that car, not a problem. Anyway, so that was where some of my self-talk got highlighted, and it was, yeah, it really does do damage that is, I find it challenging to undo it.
I think that's the key, is noticing it as early as you can, right? And I think sometimes it's the environment that you're in that where you'll notice it quicker. Like you were in a workshop and all about internal work. So when things are a little slower, you have time to digest it a little bit and go, oh, that's interesting, that's weird, or I want to pay attention to that one, or I don't want to say that out loud. And then there's other times where things are happening so quickly that I don't know if we really notice that it's there unless you've had a chance to settle down and reflect on it. Um,
Totally. And I like your other point about why is it always negative? Like, when do we? I'm racking my brain right now to remember a time that I had quiet whispers in my head that went, "Good on you, Chris. You did a great job."
well, I have another example, and comes from a different angle because I was with the kids. They had, I don't know, I had this was some barbecue at the school or something, and I ran into some people who I used to know from CrossFit, and they saw some of the videos I posted the last month or so from the
Of your
quarterfinal.
CrossFit. Yeah.
Yeah, uh, and she was saying, "Oh, congratulations, good for you. Like that must have been so, you must have been so proud of yourself." And I started like downplaying it.
Oh,
Like, oh, it wasn't that big a deal. I'm not really that fit. Like it's all, I don't know. Like I started like minimizing it. And though my self-talk was minimization, it wasn't, had nothing to do with, beating myself up, but I was making myself smaller. Um, and it was hard to like give myself the pat on the back and the, yeah, I am proud of myself. Like it is cool that I got where I got. So, and I think it still comes from that same place. We learn, at least I know I learned from my parents, be humble, and you don't boast about your wins or whatever. Like it's just not something that we do, especially as Canadians. Um, Sometimes I think Americans are a little bit different in that regard. But yeah, look at me, I'm amazing.
yeah, yeah. Aussies don't really have that
I
approach either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's why there's a similarities between your countries and mine. So yeah, so that whole humbleization of the internal monologue, it's there too, and I think it's part of the same self-talk that doesn't support you as a person and what you're trying to do.
And one of the things that I would get caught out on years ago was people giving me a compliment. I mean, of any level. "Oh, Chris, that dress looks great on you." Or anything that's just like really minimal. I would minimalize it immediately. I would not accept it. I would give credit to somebody else. Like all of those things would happen. And I got to a point where I wanted to change it. And I don't know what made me want to change it, but I wanted to change it. And so I started practicing just saying thank you. And what that did was it overrode what my self-talk was still saying. And it started to change it gave me a louder voice to listen to. And so I can hear myself going back to the car thing. That's what I got to change with the car reversing thing. I can hear it.
Thank you for backing me up so nicely.
But let's just stick with my other story for the minute. So I would start saying thank you. And now when somebody gives me a compliment, I bought when we went down, because we went down south, so it was a little colder than where we are. And I didn't have a warm enough jacket. I was freezing. Anyway, it wasn't that cold, but I was freezing. And so I'd gone and bought a jacket and I wore it on our winery tour, and some of the younger kids, because we were the oldies, but the young ones on the bus tour were like, "Oh, I love your jacket." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And I noticed that I could just accept. And I was proud of the jacket that I was wearing, and it's pretty and it was warm and it was lovely, and there was no other self-talk that went on. So after a number of years, I have managed to do that. So as I'm sharing that story,
I'm waiting for step two. Yeah.
I will now apply that same theory to me reversing the vehicle and making sure that I say out loud and make sure it's a louder voice than the internal one. Because we're always going to pay attention to the louder voice.
Or the persistent one, like the repetitive one. And I think for me it's that one, not necessarily the loudest one. So being more
So I could
being
make a
intentional.
louder, persistent voice by every time I get in the car going, I love reversing this car. It's so easy and it's just, I could just make it that. I love reversing this car. It's so easy. And if I persistently say that every time I get in the car, that will chip away at that other experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we still got to go back to the original thing you said. You got to notice it in the first place.
Yeah, and that's tricky. But when you start to notice it, you'll notice it more in more places. You're going to notice it anytime you make a quote unquote mistake, or I don't know, you burn something in the oven or whatever, right? Like there's a ton of examples that I'm sure people here will recognize in themselves where they immediately jump on themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I do it a lot when I feel like I haven't matched my own expectations. So if I have pretty high expectations for myself when it comes to my work and showing up for others. So I've noticed in my journaling pretty much every day, it's always about being available. Um, that kind of feel where I'm always like pushing what my availability is um, for others.
Mm-hmm.
So I have this high level of expectation that I can reach that at every single time. But reality is that life happens and sometimes I'm not available and sometimes because I'm on another call, like, I don't know, Facebook Live. Um, and I'm not available, but I have this, and then I go, oh, I wasn't available to take that call. And there's a beat up that goes on there. If I just lower some expectations, maybe that would also help the self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can just rephrase the being available to being available when it works, rather than just constantly being 100% available. But that's the other area that I find I still have to keep refining is what I'm again, it's the louder voice. If I'm journaling every day, that's the louder voice that I've got. That's the stuff that's a help to identify some of that, what's going on and what I'm saying to myself and what I'm feeling. So that's, yes, you can be like me and say things out loud to yourself as you get in the car, which I will be doing every time I get in that car now, or you can write it down and that can also be a louder voice.
Yeah, and I think there's something to that too, that kind of mind-body connection with what you're writing versus what's in your head. I think a lot of people get stuck with whatever the thought is up here, but they don't get it out and see it for what it is, or hear themselves say it, right? And I think that's where people will catch themselves as well when somebody asks them something and then they whatever they qualify it or they beat themselves up or whatever, like they'll physically hear the words coming out of their mouth, maybe now, hopefully that they've heard this. But if you're a writer and a journaler, when you start writing the thoughts and ideas down, and then if that doesn't even work, reading what's written, and if you kind of read it from a perspective of somebody like who has fresh eyes of this, what would they think if they read this?
Mm,
Is that a cogent thought? Does that make sense? That sounds
yes.
like there's a bit of attitude in there, or someone's being a little rough on themselves, or whatever.
Yeah, it's like, really, Chris, you can be available 100% of the time. Is that reality? To know that that's true.
And when you said that, actually, what was going through my mind was the quality of your availability, right? Like you can't
Right?
be, even if you are available, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're available. You know what I mean? So whether you're on a Facebook Live with me, which is way more important than any other work you've ever done, I understand that. I get it. I get it, right? But there's going to be points in your day where you're more available than you would be
Yes.
otherwise. So
Yes.
yeah, I think qualifying it too might be helpful.
It might be very helpful. Yes. So yes, paying attention to self-talk is always a good thing. And it can be hard to do it. I think this is the other thing to acknowledge is that it's not easy to acknowledge the self-talk that you have because we want to put such a we want to put our best foot forward, right? That's the goal. And so it's not always easy to pay attention to what the self-talk is.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not always the best foot forward talk. So we just don't want to pay attention. We kind of want to avoid it and push it to the side. But if we can recognize it and recognize that it's actually influencing our ability to put our best foot forward. I was going to go back to the reversing the car. It's a thing. Like if I put my best foot forward in reversing the car, then I'm going to do it and I'm going to ace it. But if I've got that self-talk accompanying my best foot forward on that, then I'm not going to do it well and I'm going to worry about it and I'm going to get it wrong and I'm going to, oh my God, you can hear it. Oh, that's ridiculous. Where if I can recognize and go, okay, do I choose that self-talk or do I change it up? Then I'm going to do a much better job at it. So recognizing.
I'm having a second thought about the self-talk. It's not all bad. It's not all bad. I think we focus
No.
on the ones that definitely stand out as being negative. But I had a couple of thoughts this week about calling in sick, and yesterday I decided to get somebody else to cover off my class last night. And it was kind of like a quiet voice, like, you should get somebody to do that class. Like you probably shouldn't do that class. You need to rest. I don't know if it was a super loud voice, but I appreciated that voice.
It was loud enough for you to pay attention.
I think it was repetitive enough that you don't have to do it all the time. You can ask for help. You can be sick. You're allowed to be sick. You're not, infallible. You're allowed to be human. It's okay. You can be sick.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's in there too to support you, but I think if you can evaluate what's there somehow to identify, is it serving me or is it not serving me? Is this a positive thought that's helpful or putting me in the direction that serves me, or is it one that is keeping me down, stifling me, and hurting me in some way?
Yeah. And hearing that there will be multiple thoughts going on at the same time.
What?
Okay, that's just me. I have them running. Is it like 100 tabs
There's
all at once?
There's 100 things going on upstairs right now.
No, there are. Because you're talking about the distinguishing the positives. Sometimes I know for me, I can go, this potentially has some impact on me. And then I've got to pay attention to whether I'm being negative or I'm actually being a little bit more protective of myself and need to make sure that I pay attention. Because I've got a lunch coming up that I'm not particularly looking forward to. I'm not sure it's going to serve me to be there for 3 hours. And that's the self-talk, right? And so what I'm doing is I'm limiting the time span that I'm going to be at the lunch, which is an hour and a half, which is plenty of time for an hour for a lunch anyway. And I will show up and do and be prepared for that hour and a half, knowing that I've set some boundaries to help allow my system to feel a little more comfortable going into that situation. And that's another way that you can make sure, if you're paying attention to what you're saying to yourself about an upcoming event or something you've got to do, is well, if that's feeling really negative, what is it that I can do to soften that or to make it feel not so negative?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something else we can do with self-talk. But it still comes back to exactly what you said at the beginning. You've got to realize it's going on in the first place. You can't do any of those things.
Can't change what you can't see.
Or hear.
Or
Or
hear.
yeah, all of those things. Yes.
Awareness.
So there we go. We have solved self-talk.
Yeah, we've circled back to the very beginning. You could have hung up after the first 2 minutes. How about that?